So first of all, I'm going to apologize a little bit for being so Hague software heavy today. Those are the guys that it's easy to get to come up here and do these kinds of talks. But if you're interested in giving a talk, please get in touch with me. I know we've had some more people come in. Next month it's going to be Floyd May. I think he's from Tulsa, coming in to talk about Salt Stack. So, and I got confirmation from him today he will be here. So, my name's Clayton Flesher. I organize this thing. I do integration, and I do some DevOps, and I do Chef less than perfectly. Some of these best practices are going to be things that I am, after having given a talk on, am obligated to now do. So you guys are going to be learning from some of my mistakes today. So just a real quick, who here has used Chef? I got 2 people, and I work with both of them. Who here? Yes, it is. So Chef is a configuration management tool. Any Ansible users, Puppet users? Okay, Chef's an alternative to those. It just has a different approach. So I believe Ansible and I think Puppet is a push model. It's like, hey, I got all these servers. I'm going to push things to them. Chef, you have a server that lives out in the world called a Chef server. Every however much time you tell it to, one of your nodes that's registered with that Chef server checks in with the Chef server to see if it needs to download any changes to configuration and that kind of stuff. It's long-term configuration management that is ideally hands-off. Chef has this, so Chef's written by Ruby people. So Ruby people are notorious for making cute names for things. So Chef has cookbooks. They're just where you store recipes. Recipes are fancy bash scripts. The Chef people are going to hate me for saying that. Yeah. Resources are another thing that live in cookbooks. Resources are things the recipes implement. So I need to have Nginx on this machine. I have a recipe that, based on what kind of operating system I'm on, I run this recipe. That recipe says, I need this resource and this resource and this resource to have Nginx on this machine configured this way, that kind of thing. Chef server is a thing that lives out in the world that all your servers can talk to, and it checks in all the time with the Chef server to see if you've made updates to any of the cookbooks. Nodes are those things that check in with the Chef server. And the Chef Supermarket, it's an open source place where you can download Chef cookbooks. That's basically everything you need to know about Chef. And it says in the first one, you can use it for configuration management tool, mostly for servers, mostly. You can also do it for other things. I tried to do it on a Vagrant box one time, it went badly. But you can do it on other things too. I think you can do Raspberry Pis as like anything you could install software on. So first rule of Chef best practice is actually use a Chef server. So some people try to get away with something called Chef Solo, which means like, hey, I have cookbooks. I'm going to get on there and run this command and install all this stuff. And it's a bad idea because you have to actually SSH into the machine and run the Chef Solo all the time. And the whole point of Chef is like that it reaches out to the server periodically and does all the configuration. That's not configuration management. That's fancy bash scripting with no over long-term updates or maintenance. Chef server can be used on cloud or on-prem as long as all your nodes can talk to it. You're fine. You should. So fun story: when your Chef server doesn't get maintained, and you run out of space on your Chef server goes down, and you lose the PostgreSQL database that was on the machine, and you lose all of your cookbooks that were on there probably. And so you can actually store all that stuff in Postgres externally and in an S3 bucket and that kind of stuff. It might help you if you have a major outage on your Chef server. And also, check on your Chef server every once in a while because you're doing configuration management with that thing. It's managing a lot of your machines, but you're in charge of making sure that it's healthy. Like visible? Yeah, have a health check on your Chef server maybe. So yeah, so Chef server does a lot. It has like a Redis queue and Postgres and all that. So it's big. So, yeah, take care of it. Use the Chef client cookbook. Always use the Chef client cookbook. So the whole idea behind Chef is what the Chef client cookbook does is it says like, hey, when I create this server, configure this server to actually check in with the Chef server every 30 minutes or every hour, offset by like some random number, because you don't want everybody checking in exactly on the hour. But some people, they provision a server with Chef, it registers the node with the Chef server, and then they come back 6 months later and they're like, my node hasn't checked in with the server in 6 months, I can't remember why, and it's because I forgot to run the Chef client cookbook. So always run the Chef client cookbook. Use Chef for configuration management, aka use Terraform for actually standing up machines. So you can stand up and provision a server from scratch with Chef. It's really not what it's intended for. Terraform is the best tool for that. We actually had a Terraform talk a couple months ago. The Sonic guys came in and talked about it. Chef is a first-class citizen in the Terraform world. They integrate really well together, but they do have separation of concerns, and you should not use Chef for creating EC2 instances on AWS. It's really not what it's intended for. Use Berkshelf. Every fully functional language has a package management system. Berkshelf is the package management system for Chef. It is the right package management system for Chef. This isn't JavaScript where we have long arguments about which package management system we should use. It is the one agreed upon by everyone in the Chef community, and if you're not using Berkshelf, you are doing Chef wrong. And also, that also means you should probably be using a different code repository for each of your organization's cookbooks. What that basically means is it makes it easier to use Berkshelf if you're not using a monorepo for all your cookbooks. I made that mistake. It's an easy one to make. Use roles. Use them sparingly. That means, so when you stand up a server, your server has this thing called a run list. And the run list has a list of cookbooks in it. And it says, go do this cookbook, and this cookbook, and this cookbook, and this cookbook. So give me Chef Client, give me my Nginx, give me whatever. Or you can put all that together inside of a role that says, like, hey, this is going to be your proxy server role. This machine, when you stand it up, uses the proxy server role. That's a little nice because it does a little bit of separation of concerns. You don't have this big, long run list that you have to manage. You can handle that with roles. The only problem is then you get big, long run lists of roles. Don't do that. Have 1 or 2 roles, preferably 1, 2 at the most roles per run list. And then roles allow you to do separation of concerns because like when you stand up a machine with Terraform, you don't have to have this big, long run list in your Terraform code. You just say, it's a proxy server, or it's an app server, or it's this kind of app server, and it needs to have, my organization users on it and that kind of stuff. The role handles all that for you. But to do that safely, you also need to use something called wrapper cookbooks. So cookbooks are where you put all your recipes, which are your fancy bash scripts. A wrapper cookbook is a cookbook that has cookbook dependencies. It just says, I need this cookbook and this cookbook and this cookbook, and I need these particular recipes from those cookbooks. And I don't have any logic in me, nothing fancy in me. I'm literally just a wrapper around all the other things where the logic lives. The nice thing about that is you can version this. So you can manage it and hardcode it and say, this role and this environment in Chef is only going to use, that's another thing is environments I didn't get to, but you can say, use this particular version of this wrapper cookbook for this environment and use this particular version of this wrapper cookbook for this environment, and that lets you keep doing development on your cookbooks and moving forward on them while still pegging like production environment or whatever to a particular role. Wrapper cookbooks make that possible. We believe in testing. Testing is good, and testing in Chef is both not difficult and it's actually the easiest testing experience I've ever had as far as testing goes. Like I do development in Mule, and unit testing is not easy compared to this. It supports a ton of different systems to test in. So you can test in Vagrant, you can test in Docker, you can actually fire up an AWS instance really quick, run your Cookbook in that AWS instances, make a bunch of assertions against that AWS instance, and then tear it back down immediately. That's how you get charged a few pennies. And it's really fast. DigitalOcean's the same way, though. I don't remember how DigitalOcean does their billing, so it might be different. It might be more than a few pennies to use the DigitalOcean. But the AWS one, if you're firing it up in a T2 Micro, you're getting charged pennies around $11 last month on DigitalOcean? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, well, I haven't been doing a lot of DigitalOcean stuff, so I don't know if that's a good number or not. But you can do it locally with Vagrant and Docker. You don't have to stand it up in the cloud. I do Vagrant a lot. It's nice, except you can't do tests in parallel with Vagrant. So the cool thing is I can say, like, I want this cookbook to work on CentOS and Amazon Linux, and I want it to work on Ubuntu and a bunch of different operating systems. And you can declare all of that in your test suite, and your tests will fire up a Docker container or a Vagrant box or whatever, depending on what you tell it to use for each one of those operating systems, and run your stuff in there and make all your assertions and say, yeah, I have the services running that I'm supposed to have, and tear it all back down. The more operating systems you use with Vagrant, the slower your test suite's going to be, because it can't run in parallel VMs. Docker can, I think. AWS, it's really nice, because literally it just fires up a different AWS instance for each one of your different operating systems. And tears them all back down when it's done. Tests are really the only cheap way to tell if your cookbook's actually working without breaking something, because use tests for development. And then also, if you're using Terraform, there's a Test Kitchen driver, so you can actually do Test Kitchen with your Terraform as well. I can't speak to it. I haven't done it. Maybe I will get around to it someday. If I do, I'll do a talk on it. Also, use a style guide. This is one of the rules that I'm going to follow in the future, because I finally found a really good style guide I like. And also use a linter, use Food Critic. The only thing I'd say about Food Critic is if you have an open source cookbook that you're using Food Critic, fun name, as your linter, please keep your linter dependencies up to date as you update, so that people don't try to write a version of your cookbook for Chef, the newest version of Chef, and it can't even run your linter. That happens a lot. But yeah, use linters, use style guides. I don't care which one you use. This is the one I like. But find one and stick to it in your organization. It really helps. So that's it for me. Any questions? Supermarket. Okay, so I just kind of flew past that. So I have a cookbook that I've created for, I don't know, installing Mule runtime on a server. I can put that in the Chef Supermarket, and it's an open source cookbook. People can download it and use it in their suites, and they can put wrapper cookbooks around it and stuff. That's all. The supermarket is Docker Hub or what is it? Vagrant. What's NPM? It's that for the Chef world. So you get open source stuff. Yeah. On Windows? So it used to be terrible because it's a Ruby thing. It's gotten a lot better. I've actually used it on Windows recently. When I told you I was doing some Vagrant stuff. I was setting up a Windows VM with it, and you can do so. It has what's the big Windows package manager now? Does anybody remember? There's a Chocolatey. Chocolatey is a first-class citizen in Chef now, so it can handle Chocolatey well. It does PowerShell just fine. It's all first-class stuff. And so the trick with Windows cookbooks is, even if they say their cookbook works on Windows, go check their test suite to see if they're actually testing it on Windows, because a lot of people will write a cookbook, say, yeah, it's supposed to work on Windows, but then they're not actually testing it on Windows as they make updates. Your best bet is to find cookbooks specifically for the Windows environment, which is really not that hard, because a lot of times the things you're trying to configure and manage on Windows don't exist on other operating systems. But I've had surprisingly positive experience doing Chef and Windows together. And the Chef DK works fine on Windows. Yes? Okay, yeah, so Chef and security. Based on the recent hardware stuff, I'm not sure how to answer that part of it. Chef and security is an ongoing concern. The recommendation in that Linter I sent is try not to have secure stuff in your cookbooks. Like just don't do dangerous stuff in your cookbooks. Hang on, I will get to you. But Chef has a free solution and a not free solution. The free solution, which is not great, is called encrypted data bags. They're not really secure. I feel like they're security theater because you're putting the key to unlock the data bag on the machine that's unlocking the data bag. And the cookbook has to know where to look for it, so it's not super secure. It's not great. There's another thing called Chef Vault. My boss hasn't paid for it yet, even though I've been trying to get him to. So I don't know much about it, but it's supposed to be a lot better. You had a question.
I was going to scare you. There's the non-free Chef, there's Chef Compliance. I don't know if they were asking. So Chef is a tool for enterprise security also. They use an Inspec for checking security controls instead of for.
Oh.
That's a whole other nuance.
Oh, yeah. So Chef's testing, the thing that it uses to make the assertions on the machine is this thing called Inspec, where it says, like, I have these configurations on the machine, or I don't have these configurations on the machine. Chef has a service called Chef Compliance, where they use Inspec for asserting security settings on machines and things like that. So you can actually be sure that the machine you have over time has somebody didn't come in and change your security settings out from underneath you without your machine letting you know. And the nice thing is if you're doing good configuration management and you have cookbooks written to fix that, your cookbooks will automatically roll it back every 30 minutes or so. Yeah, observability. So, and then my last speaker is Adam